All right, welcome everyone. In today's session, we're going to look at how we can visualize time-related data within dashboards, also within local dApps. So we're going to use a specific component called the timeline component, and that's a component within local dApps and dashboard that's going to allow us to visualize data that has a start and an end time, for example, so that's bound in time. So we're first going to look at what the component is, so what we want to visualize, how it works. We're going to look at some settings, and then we're going to get into the features. So we're going to talk about events, about different templates that we can apply, about the grouping and actions. So all of these are configurable on that timeline component. And then we're going to look into the user interaction tips and go into some exercises. So the first thing, what is the timeline component? Basically, it's going to allow you to, for example, display events that have a start and an end time, display different types of activities, tasks. They can be bookings, appointments, basically anything that has a start and an end time that is bound in time in some way can be displayed on this component. So you can see an example over here on the right-hand side, where you can see we have also different swim lanes or different categories. We're going to look at that grouping in a second, and you can see that we have all of these different events. This example already has some nice templating applied to it, but we're going to look at that at the end of the session as well. So once you take the component, you drag some data on there. The data will be able to be passed in through GQI, for example. You will need to set up some things to get everything working nicely. So the first thing that you need to do is provide some context on the start and the end time, because otherwise the component doesn't know how it needs to draw all of the events or all of the data points that you have provided to it. So everything needs to have that start and end time. So you can specify those columns when you would go in the general settings of that timeline. But you can also just make sure that it auto-detects it. So based on the column names of your data, if you're using start time, end time, it's going to automatically detect that these are the start and end times of your events or whatever data you're working with. And then it's going to automatically configure that for you when you drag the data on the component. So that's pretty nice. There's some other settings in there related to dynamic units. So if your connector is using dynamic units, you can choose to enable or disable them. And you can also set up the default time range. So you can do that manually. You can choose a custom time range, and you can also link the time range to another component if you would like to feed it from another page within your local dApp, for example. You can just set it up in a way that it's automatically updating within your app. Then we also have some settings based on data retrieval and highlighting. So you can enable or disable highlighting. Highlighting will basically happen when you right-click on the timeline component and then you drag over a specific range, for example. It will highlight that time range. If this is not enabled, nothing will happen when you right-click and drag, so it won't be highlighting the selected range. The data updating, it will be very dependent on the underlying data that you are using for or within the component. If the data supports real-time updates, you can choose here to update that data, but it all depends basically on the GQI data source that you're using at the moment. Then, next to all of the different settings, we also have events and actions. So events are things that will be fired through the local dApp that you're using, and you can basically subscribe on these events. So you can configure events to initiate a certain action. We're going to look at the component actions in a second, but it's important to know the different events that we have available within the component so that we know how we can configure certain actions. So we have the on-range select, for example. I've talked about that highlighting before. So if, for example, a range is selected, you can choose to set a new highlight on that range. You can choose to clear previous highlights, for example. You can also choose to change the viewport to the selected range. So you can do all kinds of things based on these events. Then we can also resize the event. So if we have a lot of events on our timeline and we want to manage the start and end time from within the local dApp or the dashboard, that's all possible. So you can configure these actions, and then when they are resized, you can trigger a script, for example, that will update the start and the end time in the background through that script. We're going to do exactly that within a second when we look at the exercises, so don't worry if it's all a bit theoretical at the moment. And then, of course, I've shown you the grouping on the first slide. So we have different groups. If we would like to change the group, for example, of a specific task, we're going to look at an example where we have a lot of different tasks that are assigned to people. So we're going to group them by assignee. And then later on, we want to be able to just move them from one assignee to the other just by using our just by dragging and dropping it to a different item. All right, so that's about it for the events. Now, I've talked about that grouping already, so the grouping is going to be done based on some column from your data set, so you can always group on one column. You can also choose to have the grouping be updatable, so you can link it to another component, for example, where you can choose which column needs to be used for the grouping, but mostly you're just going to use one specific column. All right, let's get into it, and let's take a quick look at an exercise. So before we continue, we will need to open up the catalog, and then here we can look for the app, and it should be let me quickly go back, building an enhanced timeline. All right, so let's go over here, click that deploy button, and then make sure we select the correct system and deploy the item to our system. So it's still deploying. We're going to give it a second. Deployment was successful. So now we can go to our system. If you're looking for your system and you can't find it, you can always go to dataminer.services and then make sure you select the correct organization and then look for your system in there. So mine is in the Skyline Communications Organization BPA, and then clicking on home, it will open up the web landing page for your system. Now you can see that a new section was created and an app was added within that section for us to use. So let's take a look at what we have here. And you can see we have 4 different exercises. So we're going to start with the first one. And the first one will be all about just that grouping functionality that I've just talked about. So to give you guys an idea, this is the data that we will be working with. We just have a lot of user tasks, right? They all have an ID, a title, start and end date, also a state and an assignee. Okay, so it's a pretty simple data set. There's quite some tasks in there that we can use. And yeah, that's basically the data set that we're going to use for the coming 4 exercises. So the assignment here is to group the timeline by assignee. So let's start that exercise. It's going to open up a new low-code app. And let's quickly see what our data is doing here. So we can zoom out a little bit until we find the tasks. If you want to quickly have the tasks available for yourself, you can just go to settings here and then take today as the default time range, and then it's just going to open up the day for you and you will be able to see all of the tasks. So let's go back here. And of course we want to group all of these settings. Let me just restart because I executed the exercise before. So let's go back to today. And here we can see that we have a big mess, you could call it, of different tasks, but it's quite difficult to see who is responsible for which task. So we want to group them by assignee. So to easily do that, we can just go to our data here on the right-hand side. Then we can look for queries. We can open up the all tasks query, and then we will be looking for the assignee fields. You can drag and drop that over the blue square that you can see over there. If you would leave it over the filter, it would basically filter out based on that column, but we want to group based on that column. And after doing that, you can see that we have all of the different assignees on the left-hand side and all of the tasks that they are responsible for on the right-hand side within their lane. So basically all of the tasks are now grouped based on that assignee field. So that's great. That's exactly what we wanted. So yeah, that's it for the first exercise. So maybe let's go back here to our PowerPoint. So we've talked about events already, but next to the events, we also have the actions. And yeah, these are very important. These are actions that will be bound to the timeline component. There's different ones available, so we can fetch the data. So basically, whenever we would resize something at the end, when we have ran the automation script, for example, to update the timings, we also want to fetch the data again because we want to make sure that the new event or the new start and end time were effectively set also within our data. We can highlight time ranges, we can clear highlights, and as I've said before, if you would basically drag over a range or select a range, you can also choose to set the viewport to that range. So that's also an action that you have available within our component. Now, let's maybe quickly look into these actions. So let's go to exercise 2 here. And here we want to do 3 different things. So we want to update the task times when the item is resized. So if I go to one of the edges, I want to be able to drag and drop to resize the time. I also want to be able to change the timing of a certain task by just clicking on it, dragging and dropping, and then letting go of it. So I want to update the start and end time at that, with that action. And then last but not least, we're going to try to change the assignee also on the fly. So whenever we change it to a different person, we want the task assignee to be updated as well. So let's open up the second exercise and let's have a look on how we can achieve all of that. So make sure to select the component, go to settings, and again, I'll have to restart because I've done the exercise before. So let's go here to settings and pick today, just so we have all of the tasks in here. And then here we can see that there are a lot of different events, and that's going to basically allow us to configure the actions that will happen with that event. So the first thing is we want to update the data when a task is resized. So that means that whenever I would drag the start, for example, and I want to extend the task so it starts earlier, we want the start time of that task to be updated. So let's take the item resize. And basically item resize is going to work either for the end or the start, so it will do both at once. And we want to launch a script. So normally, by deploying that catalog package, everybody should have the scripts available for this exercise, so we can just go down, and you should be able to find an update task time script. Now, we still need to pass the start and end time, the new start and end time, to that script so that it knows to which value it needs to be updated. We're going to do that through linking. So we want to have the event info. We're going to take the new time spans, all right, because the old time spans, that's just what was already present in our data. We don't want that information. We want the new timestamp from the event to where our user has dragged it, all right? So we want to take that value, and then the end time will be the to property from our data. For the start time, let's do the same. So also the new time spans, but then we'll take the from property. And then, so now we have told the script, okay, this is the new start time, this is the new end time, but we still need to tell it which task it needs to update. So it needs to know the ID of the task to update. And that's what we're going to do now. So we're just going to take the current item. So we're going to take the table, and we're going to take the task ID property from that table. So now we have the 3 parameters that are filled in. We can add another action upon completion. So after executing the script, we want to execute the component action, and what do we want to do? We want to fetch the data to make sure that the update went through correctly to the backend. All right, so let's click OK. And now you can already see when I hover over my tasks that I have these handlebars here that are appearing. Now, of course, if I try to click and drag, it's not working because we don't have interaction when we are in edit mode for local dApp. So let's quickly publish or preview the draft, and then zoom out a little bit. You can do that with Control Scroll. And normally, if I would now drag, drop, and let go, we can see that it's correctly updating the timing for our task. And we can do that for different tasks. If I would extend this one, we can see that it updates, and it's shifting all of the tasks just to give us this nice overview. So that's the first thing. Let's go back into edit mode. Select the timeline component again, go to settings, and then here we can look for the on-item move. Basically, this is quite the same as we have done before. So again, let's launch a script. Let's do update task time, and again, for the parameters, let's take the new time spans 2, link this. We will link the task ID like this. And then we will link the start time. Also, very important, don't forget, we always want to take the new time spans. All right, so let's select that, property name from, because it's the start time, and let's link it. Now, upon completion again, we want to fetch our data. And let's do it like this. Click OK. And now if we go back to preview the draft, let's see what happens when I take an item, and now I can completely just select it, drag it, let it go, and it's going to update the start and the end time for that item. So now we can extend the start time, we can extend the end time. You can also just move an item at once, but the last thing that I want to do, for example, if social media is more something for Frank, I want to be able to drag this to Frank his lane so that Frank can take care of it whenever he feels like that. So let's go back to edit. Let's go to settings. Don't forget to select the component because otherwise you won't see all of the settings. And then here you can see at the top, at the bottom right hand side, excuse me, that we have a non-group change action. So you can click on that and we want to configure it. Again, we have a script ready for that. We're not going to update the task time, but we're going to update the task assignee this time. And as an assignee, we want to have the new item, right? Because we want to have the updated value of assignee. We don't want the old assignee to be passed to the script. Let's take the assignee property, and then for the ID, doesn't matter if you take new or current, it's going to stay the same. And let's take task ID here. Let's link this. Then upon completion again, let's fetch our data as we have done before. So fetch the data and click OK. All right, so let's double check this now. If we preview the draft, what happens if I take social media and I want to give it to Frank? Up, and immediately we can see it's updated. So now we can take any task, we can assign it to a different person, and the assignee will be updated. So that's excellent. That's exactly what the workbook asked us to do. All right. Let's see if we can do something else. All right, so maybe a few user interaction tips, because now that we have created some interactivity on our timeline component, it also means that whenever the user would interact with it, it will update the values and it will change something within our data. So sometimes, for example, let's say that you're grabbing an item, you're moving it around, it can be in time, you can do group change, but you want to cancel whatever you're doing. Before you let go, you can just press escape, and then it's going to cancel out that action. So let's quickly do this here, for example. So if I'm dragging this one, right, and before I let go, I do escape, you can see it's automatically going back to the original location. You can also do that for resizes. So it works for every action that you have configured. So that's pretty nice. That's just to make sure that we're not messing up the data, we're not doing something wrong within our system. Now, you can also see if we're dragging and dropping, for example, we can, it's automatically going to use calculate the time intervals to switch between. If you want to have more granularity, you can use shift. Then here you can see now it's moving by the hour instead of using intervals of 6 hours. All right, so that's one of the ways that you can more granularly configure the start and the end time or execute any actions. It also works for just dragging the item. You can see here now it's again per 6 hours. If I'm using shifts, it is going to allow me to more granularly drop that in my timeline component. So that's pretty nice. And then, I've told it before, but if you're using control and scroll, then you can zoom. So that's basically how you can move around. And then you can just drag the timeline if you want to move around in time. You can also do that by shifting and using the scroll wheel. So control will be zoom and shift will be moving around in time. So that's a bit how you can interact and how you can cancel any actions if you would like to do that. All right, so let's continue with the third exercise. So here we're going to try to make the task management a bit smarter. So there's a few things that we want to do. We're going to make sure that we can select or highlight time range, and then we're going to edit our app so that if we create a new item, it's automatically using the highlighted time range that we've selected on the timeline component before. Then also, whenever the task is created, we want that highlight to be cleared again, because otherwise it's going to stay highlighted and it will be a bit weird for the user interaction. The data is still the same, so let's have a look at the assignment. So we want to add actions to highlight the time range when a range is selected. And one important thing to note is that you can have multiple highlighted time ranges. All right, so if you want to only have one, it's something you have to be mindful of. You have to configure that within your actions. So we'll first clear the highlights at all, and then we're going to highlight our new range ourselves. So after that, we're going to use the timeline's selected time range. We're going to feed it into a panel so that it's automatically applied if we want to create a new task. Then the last item will be to clear that time range whenever the task has been created. So let's go to the exercises here. We can see that some templating has been added, but still all of the functionality for resizing is available. So let's select our component. Let's go to settings. And then here at the bottom right-hand side, we can see use highlighting. So we're going to allow that. We're not going to touch this. We're going to configure action for what happens on range select. So let me first show you that currently when I'm trying to use my right click and drag, there's not a lot happening, all right? Maybe you can hear the clicks that I'm trying to do when I'm dragging, but I want to be able to highlight my time range that way. So let's go back to the actions and configure an action for that. So what do we want to do? We want to execute a component action. And first, let's clear the highlights. And then once the highlights have been cleared, we want to highlight a time range. Now here it's going to give us some default time range, so we can see we have a start and an end time. But what we want to do is we want to link that to our event. All right, so we're going to take the event info and we're going to take the from property, and again here we're going to do the same for the do property, and now we have linked it, so it's going to take in the event from, okay guys, something has been highlighted. And then the low-code app framework will take that, it will take the event, it will look at the start and the end time, and it's going to highlight that time range for us. So let's just say OK. And now let's double check if this works. So if I now right click, drag and let go, we can see we have the time range that is highlighted. So great, that's for step one. let's go back into edit mode and let's look for the second step. So what we want to do now is if we do that right click, drag and let go, we want the time range to be highlighted, but we also want, if we click on this new button for creating a new task, for example, that it's automatically using that highlighted time range. So let's look for our panel here on the left hand side, and here we can see we have a new task panel. So that's the panel that's going to be opened up when this new button is clicked. We can double check this, of course. So here we have an on click action, and we can see that it's opening the pop-up new task, and then it's going to set some values to automatically load data into our form. So let's edit this task here. Let's edit the panel. And what we want to do now is we want to make sure that the when, so the time range for the task, is automatically filled in based on the selection. We can do that by going to components, and then we want to look in the tasks, and here you can see that we have our timeline. Now the timeline has a few different properties: selected items, viewport, selected groups, but the one we want to have is the selected time ranges. So let's take this one, put the time span on there. Then you can already see that it's updating the value. So now if we want to double check that this works, let's go to preview draft. And for example, let's just select from the 14th of June to the 15th. Now if I open this up, we can see that the when is automatically filled in from the 14th to the 15th. So this is a test, and we're going to assign this to Bob. If we click create, then we can see that our newly created item is present in the timeline, and it's shown for Bob. So that's great. That's the second thing that we wanted to do, but there's still one thing that we need to configure, because you can see that now it's holding that same highlight. You can see that's over here. So the highlighting is not being removed. And let's configure that. So let's go back to panels, new task, and when the user clicks the create button, let's have a look and see what actions have been configured. So it's going to launch an add task, fetch the data, close the panel, but we also want to execute a component action on the timeline, and we want to clear all of the highlights. So let's click OK. Let's preview this again. So if I now take a new time range, for example, and I can say this is test 2. Let's assign this, for example, to Eve. Let's create it, and you can see the data is updated. We have our event, our task is present, and the highlighted time range has been cleared. So that's great. That's everything that we wanted. So that means that it's now very easy to just select that time range and then create a new task. And once it has been created, the time range will be cleared. So that's it for the third exercise. Let's go back to the presentation. Then there's one important thing that we can look at that's left for the timeline component, and that's templating. So basically templating is something that you can use within a lot of components in local dApps and dashboards. It's used quite often as well, and it will allow you to just give a better overview of the data that you're trying to do. You can set up conditional values for everything, etc., etc. So you can fully customize that. You can customize how something looks. You can, based on, for example, the state of your task, you can show a different icon, you can show different colors. So there's a lot of different possibilities. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. We're just going to get on with the last exercise. And that's very important. If you're managing to successfully complete the exercise, just take a screenshot, upload that on Dojo. So if you're watching on YouTube, there will be a link in the video description. Just upload it, and we will be able to give you some DevOps points for that. So let's have a look at that exercise and what we need to do. So we're first going to add an icon to represent the task status, because if we look at the data, we can see that we have different states. We have active, not started, and normally there should be a hold in there as well. All right, so 3 different states that you have available. And these are the states that we want to use. So we're going to show an icon, then we'll maybe use a play button for something that's active, the pause button for something that's on hold. And if something is not started, for example, we can just use a stop button. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. And then after that, we also want to add a context menu. So you can also add actions, again, within these templates. So if the state icon is clicked, we want to open up a context menu with all of the different states that are available. Then based on the state that is clicked, we want to update that state of that task. So there will be some configuration in there for us, but I promise you it's not that difficult, and it's actually quite powerful to show you how you can enable your users with just a few clicks. You can open up that context menu, you can put in different values, the user can click it, and then it's automatically updating the data in the background. So let's quickly take a look on that fourth exercise. So the first thing that we will need to do is update the template, because at the moment, as you can see, we don't have any icons available. Let me quickly open up. Voila. So let's select the component, go to settings, and then you will need to go down, go to layout, go down, and here you can see we have the query and we have our template for our data. So we can edit that. And the first thing that we're going to do is add that icon in there, and then we're going to position it a bit so that it's under the title and it's nicely aligned. So let's go to Tools, select Icon, and now we can just drag and drop that icon over here. So that's not everything that we want to do, because we still want to be able to position the icon within that layer. So let's just take in some values. So we want the icon to be 28 pixels wide, and then maybe 22 pixels in height, or let's take 25, for example. Then the distance from the top should be 37. Let's maybe lock the size already for our item. Then, and my PC was freezing a bit. Let's go back here. Let's make sure it's 5 pixels from the bottom. Let's log that as well. Here you can choose how far it should be from the left-hand side. So we'll take 8 pixels, log that too. And then you can see that based on this, our icon is fully constrained. So we cannot update anything. We have it set in place and it's fixed. So if we save this, we can now see that all of the different items within our, excuse me for the cough here, all of the different items now are showing this icon. But we want the icon to be updating based on the state of the task. And that's also very easy to do. So let's go back to the icon. We're going to make sure that our icon layer is selected. We're not going to do any actions, but we're going to start with conditional cases. So the first conditional case will be that when the state is active, we want to show the icon, and here we can change the icon itself. So let's say we want to have a play button over here when it's active. So that's the first one. Then the second, when the state, again, is hold, for example, we also want to show the icon, but let's maybe take a stop button or a stop icon for that. And then the last thing, let's take pause for this. It would be better. We can use the stop for the not started. So let's again select the state when it is not started, like that. Let's maybe double check it so that we have the correct state. Yes, that's correct. And then we can show the icon again, but here we want to have that stop, like that. All right. So now we have 3 different conditional cases. So every state should be covered. So let's save this. And we can already see that all of the different states and all of the different tasks are being shown. So that's nice. But currently, when I click on it, not a lot is happening. So what do I want to do now? I want to enable the user to easily update the state of an item by just clicking on it, having a context menu, and then allowing him to choose between the 3 different states. So let's go back, then go to layout, go to edit, and we're going to configure some actions. So when the icon is clicked, I want to open up, and normally there should be a show context menu in here. Now, the show context menu will allow you to do a few different things. So we can assign a label to it. So for the labels, we're just going to use all of the different states that we have available. Then we can also assign an icon to it. So we're going to use the same icons that we've used before. And on the right-hand side here, you can see that there's a settings thing. So that's to configure actions. So again, when something is clicked, you can configure actions that need to happen based on the context menu item that has been clicked. So let's start with adding our menu items. So active, hold, and not started. Let's again use the same here. So pause. I think I went for the black one, and then here we want to go for the hub. So like that. So let's maybe already save this. And let's see now if I click on it, let's go back to here. If I click on that icon, there's something going wrong. Let's go back and see what's still missing. So let's go to layout, edit this, and let's configure it. It still needs us to add some actions. So let's launch a script. And then now we're going to update the task state. And then the ID, we can just take it from our timeline. We want to take the selected item, and we want to take task ID. So go for data, go for the timeline. That's under the tasks page. Then take the selected items or table. So that's going to be the item where the icon was clicked from. And then we're going to take the task ID property. We link that again, and then the state, we can just hard code it. So the first one was active. And upon completion, we want to fetch the data. So that's a component action right here, and fetch the data. Click OK. And that's the first one done. So now let's do the same for holds. So launch a script. Let's take the update task state. That's hold. And then for the ID again, let's look for our timeline. So that's over here, timeline 1. Selected item, and we want the ID. So let's link it. Upon completion, it's a bit repetitive, but in the end, it will give us a nice result. So let's fetch the data again. Click OK. Not started. So let's go launch a script for the last time. Update task state. Call it not started. Mind the capitalization also and the space in between. Make sure that it matches. Let's take our timeline again. Selected item, task ID. Link this. And then the component action. Fetching the data. Clicking OK. Let's save this, and I'll go to preview. So if I now click on one of the icons, you can see that it's showing me the different options. And if I want this to be set to hold, for example, it's going to update it, it's going to fetch the data. And basically that's it. So we can do that for all of the different items that we have here. So that's going to allow you to quickly update the state of a specific task. So basically, I think this will be the end of the presentation. So if you want to try this out, please do the exercise. It's very valuable. It learns you the basics of how you can work with that timeline component within the LeoCode app framework. It also allows you to configure everything, and it shows you how easy it is actually to configure everything, to set it up so that users can have an interactive timeline, because that's really the strength, I think, of this component, that interactivity, that you can allow users to update things on the fly. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one. Bye.